Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. It was another full action-packed day of weekend hoops, 4 playoff games to go ahead and get into in this one of which included the first series that wraps up at the end of the first round. And we'll talk about that game and that series wrapping up, kind of a full recap of what happened at the end of the video. But we need to begin by talking a little bit about this Suns-Clippers series, and in particular, this Game 4, which was a really fun one. This series as a whole has been really intriguing, although some big injuries have kind of taken a little bit of the magic out of it. As I'm sure you know, Paul George has missed this entire series for the Clippers, a huge blow to them, but even bigger of a blow is the loss of Kawhi Leonard, who in the first couple games of this series looked amazing. He looked like the robotic annihilator Kawhi Leonard that we've seen in the playoffs time and time again. However, in game, I think it was 1, he ended up suffering a knee sprain. In game 2, he tried to play through it, and he did for the most part. But by the time game 3 rolled around, it was just too much. There was too much pain, too much swelling, and doctors advised that he do not play on it going forward. And with Kawhi, someone who's dealt with injury issues and tore his ACL not too long ago, that's probably a good idea. And so Kawhi Leonard was out for game 3, and he was out again tonight for game 4, a big one, because if Phoenix won this one, they would go up 3-1 on the series. And that's exactly what they did. They were led by Devin Booker for the most part, who continues to be unbelievable on both sides of the ball in this series, continuing to establish himself as a superstar in this league. He had 30 points to go with 9 boards, 7 assists, and 3 steals. Once again, just ridiculous shot making, ridiculous defending, hustle plays. He's done everything for this Phoenix team, and his co-star Kevin Durant also had an amazing game. He had 31 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists. He hit some really big shots to keep the momentum in the Suns' favor, while the Clippers continued to try and find some way to take this game. But ultimately, when Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are playing like this, they're going to be almost impossible to beat on any given night. It gets even tougher when Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton are knocking down shots as well, which is exactly what they did in this game. Chris Paul in particular went crazy in the fourth quarter. He finished the game with 19 points, 4 rebounds, 9 assists, 3 steals, and 3 blocks, which may be a playoff career high for Chris Paul, getting 3 blocks. It just seems unprecedented for him. And DeAndre Ayton had 15 points, 13 boards, 2 assists, and 2 steals. All around, great game from this Suns team. They were just amazing as a whole. When these 4 guys are playing this well, it's hard to beat the Suns, although the bench continues to look really, really rough. Landry Shamet has not given them much at all. Josh Okogie gave them some good minutes. In this game, he was solid. And ultimately, I think when they get Cam Payne back as a guard off the bench, it's going to go a long way for this Suns team. But right now, when the starters are all in, they look almost unbeatable. And when the bench comes in, things just get really dicey for them. So ultimately, in the offseason, they're going to have to find a way to get more help for their stars. But for right now, they just need guys to step up. Damian Lee had some solid minutes. Like I mentioned, Josh Okogie. When Cam Payne comes back, he'll be solid. Bismack Biyombo has played some good minutes as well. They just need more help on the bench, and that may be their undoing later on. But right now, going up 3-1 in this series, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that much of an issue for the rest of this matchup. So while all the stars for the Suns were shining, the Clippers had a lot more of a disappointing performance from some of their role players compared to last game, where Norman Powell had a 40-piece tonight. He shot just 4-15, no longer the hero from last game. Marcus Morris got the starting position tonight at the 4 spot over Nick Batum, who's been terrible in this series. Unfortunately for the Clippers, Marcus Morris also not very good at this point. He had problems all season scoring efficiently, and also the defense just does not exist anymore for him. So if he's not putting the ball in the basket, he's not really doing much for your team. In fact, he was just straight up hurting the team almost every minute he was in. He shot 3 of 13 on the game. Tyronn Lue stuck with him for way too long. I still don't understand what his problem is with Robert Covington. I feel like he played some solid minutes in this one, even though they weren't great. But it's better than Marcus Morris actively hurting your team when he's in the starting lineup. Nick Batum still struggled in this game, even coming off the bench. Eric Gordon was all right with 10 points. Terrence Mann was pretty good. He had 13 points and gave them some big energy minutes. But overall, not a lot of stand-up performances for this Clippers supporting cast, one that has given a lot of solid step-up moments throughout this series, but ultimately, there just weren't many of those in this game. Except for one guy, and that guy who really kind of put the Clippers on his back and almost single-handedly soloed the Suns' Big Four was Russell Westbrook. Russ has had an amazing series so far, and he's almost single-handedly at times kept the Clippers alive with Kawhi now hurt, with Paul George missing this entire series. At the end of game 1, even though he shot terribly, he made the big defensive play that closed it out on Devin Booker, blocking him when he went to the basket. And in the past few games, he's been incredible, with this one being the best one of the playoffs for him so far. Tonight, he had 37 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 dimes, while shooting 17 of 29 from the field, including 3 of 6 from 3, while not getting a single free throw the entire night, which is ridiculous for a guy like Russ, who spends most of his game inside the arc. He was attacking the basket, finishing downhill, he was hitting mid-range jumpers, turnaround faders off the bank. Like I mentioned, he was hitting threes, he was defending at a high level. This was an amazing Russ game. In fact, he became just the second player ever to score 37 plus points in a playoff game without a single free throw. Joining it was Chuck Person back in 1991. So it's a very exclusive club that Russ now joins. And like I said, he was doing it in a variety of ways. It was just incredible. This is the Russell Westbrook that we have seen in years past, the one that we saw most recently in Washington, where he basically single-handedly dragged the Wizards to the NBA playoffs while Bradley Beal was dealing with some injury issues. Russ completely turned up, led that Wizards team to the playoffs before getting traded to the Lakers, where things really just didn't work out. It was never a good situation for either side. Russ did not fit with the supporting cast on that team. They didn't fit with him either, so it wasn't conducive to either side being very successful. And I tried to mention this to people, and I feel like a lot of people did know that when Russ was no longer a part of the Lakers, he would probably improve, and the Lakers themselves got better after trading Russ and bringing in pieces that made more sense. So ultimately, a split made a lot of sense for both sides. But there was also a large group of people who thought that Russ was just completely washed, that he wasn't a good basketball player anymore, that this would be his last season in the NBA. That's a take I heard a lot when the Clippers picked him up. There are a lot of big media personalities saying that, oh, he was a vampire in the locker room for the Lakers, he's going to do the same thing to the Clippers, that this is going to ultimately hurt the Clippers way more than it's going to help them, that he is going to single-handedly drag this Clippers team down. These were all real takes that I saw, and that a lot of people thought the Clippers were just better off not going anywhere near Russ. Now you look at what he's doing in the playoffs. If it weren't for Russ, this series would be over at this point, most likely. Like, I don't think the Clippers win a single game so far if Russ isn't playing. He has stepped up so big, and not just the absence, once again, of Paul George, but Kawhi Leonard too, who is a top 5 playoff performer, one of the best in the league. He's not here, so Russ has to do so much for this team tonight, where a lot of guys on the supporting cast didn't step up. Russ did. At times, it's very reminiscent of Russ's MVP season, where if he wasn't being a superhero on any night, the Thunder didn't really stand a chance, and I would know because I'm a Thunder fan and I watched every single game of that season. If Russ wasn't having some Herculean performance, we were going to lose almost assuredly. Russ once again is having to carry a significant load, and I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, he lost this game, they're down 3-1 in the series, so it doesn't matter, but it does. He's trying to face a Suns team without his 2 co-stars that has Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. This is most people's pick to win the Western Conference, and Russ is making it a tough series on them. In the last 3 games of the series, Russ is averaging 34.3 points per game, 6 rebounds and 8.6 assists to go with 1.3 steals, 1.3 blocks, which don't even show the full length of his defensive impact in this series, while shooting 59% from the field and 64% from 3. He's efficient. He's scoring at a high volume. He's playmaking for others. He's playing high-level defense. Russ is playing some of the most complete basketball that we've seen from him in quite some time. I tried to tell people Russ could still play this high-level basketball, that he was still an amazing player, and people, not everybody, I'm not saying everybody watching this video thought this, but people thought he was washed. People thought it was over for Russ, that he was going to be out of the league, and that it wasn't a situational problem with the Lakers, but instead that it was a Russ problem specifically. There were also people trying to just rewrite his legacy based off what he was doing with the Lakers, saying that Russ was actually never that good, that he didn't deserve his MVP, this, that, the other thing. People were rewriting history on the career of Russell Westbrook, saying that he really actually was never that good, which was just completely wrong if you ever just watched him, but people got caught up in the moment of the bad situation, the fact that Russ wasn't playing well, and decided to take that opportunity to dunk on him non-stop, which once again continued when he signed with the Clippers, people saying that, oh, this is a terrible decision. It continued into the playoffs where people were saying that, oh, Russ is, once again choking in the playoffs, when in the first game he shot very poorly, which he did, but his defensive impact was there, and now he's scoring efficiently, doing everything for the Clippers. people try to rewrite history on Russ when this is always the player that he's been, someone that gives 110%, steps up when his team needs it. And in this moment where the Clippers have nowhere else to turn, Russ is doing everything he can. Sure, it's not going to win them this series because ultimately the Suns are just so much of a better team with the injuries to the Clippers, but he's doing everything that he can to make these games as close as possible. And if a couple shots fall the Clippers' way last game, they win that one. In this one, once again, if the Clippers just get a bit more performances from some of the other guys outside of Russ, they could have taken this game as well. He's putting them in a position to succeed and win. It's just barely not happening. And overall, I guess the point I want to make with this section of the video is don't write off players in bad situations. I thought this is something that we've learned before, especially when you're talking about a first ballot Hall of Famer in Russ, someone who's won an MVP and showed how impactful he could be just a couple of seasons ago with that Wizards team. He still has that in the tank. I'm really happy that Russ is proving everybody wrong. He's my favorite player of all time. If you've been on this channel, you probably know that. As a Thunder fan, he's the greatest Thunder player in Thunder history, and ultimately I'm just super happy to see Russ excelling at the highest level on the playoff stage. I wish the Clippers were healthier so this could be a bit more of a competitive series, because if you've got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George with this level that Russ is playing at against the Suns team, there's a real shot that the Clippers could have won this series. And sure, there is still technically a path. The series isn't over yet, although I think a 3-1 deficit with Kawhi Leonard questionable, and I honestly don't think he's going to end up returning, with Paul George probably out for the series. I think this one's kind of wrapped up. I wouldn't be surprised if it's over in 5. But regardless, shout out to Russ, what he's done in this series. There were a lot of people on Twitter tonight that were talking about how Russ deserves his flowers, how they were wrong about him. But I'm sure there still are going to be people saying, oh, he still lost, this, that, whatever. Regardless, I think Russell Westbrook deserves a big apology from a lot of NBA fans, people that wrote him off, and I'm super excited to see what he can continue to do for the rest of this series, and ultimately, if and when the Clippers do get eliminated, what he can do next season, because I think he's shown that he not only belongs in the league, which once again, a lot of people thought he didn't, but that he can still be an incredibly impactful player when given the opportunity and the situation to do so. Moving on, we had Grizzlies-Lakers Game 3 today in Los Angeles, and Ja Morant was the big storyline in this one because we didn't know if he was going to play all the way up until right before tip-off. He's been dealing with that hand injury that he suffered in Game 1, kept him out of Game 2, which the Grizzlies were able to win without him. But to have any real chance in this series, the Grizzlies need Ja Morant playing at a high level, and he did end up playing, so shout out to him. He's a warrior for that. However, it was pretty clear from the get-go that the hand was kind of bothering him. He absolutely got more comfortable playing with it towards the end of the game, which we'll touch on later. But in the first quarter, he was struggling quite a bit, and it wasn't just him. The Grizzlies as a whole kind of forgot how to play basketball in the first quarter, to the tune of a 35-9 deficit at the end of the first. Yes, you heard me right. The Grizzlies scored 9 points in the first quarter, down 26 at the end of the first frame. The Lakers were not only dominant, the Grizzlies were just absolutely terrible. The offense had absolutely nothing going defensively. They couldn't seem to get any stops. Dillon Brooks was kind of shooting them out of the game. We'll talk about Dillon Brooks a little bit more later. And ultimately, going down by 26 in the first quarter of a road playoff game, you're pretty much going to automatically lose. In fact, it's near impossible to come back from something like that, although the Grizzlies gave it a good shot. Specifically, Ja Morant in the fourth quarter completely took over. He scored 22 consecutive points for the Memphis Grizzlies. He would finish this one with 45 points, 9 rebounds, 13 assists on 50% shooting while hitting 6 threes. It was a ridiculous effort, and the Grizzlies brought this back to an 8-point game with about a minute and a half to go, which is not an impossible deficit to overcome, even if it's difficult. However, it was just too little too late. The Lakers got some free throws, went up 10, and ultimately would end up winning this one decently comfortably, although the Grizzlies made them sweat a little bit more than they were hoping for, and a lot of that was due to the play of Ja Morant, who was absolutely unbelievable, playing through not just the hand injury, but he was cramping in the fourth quarter. He tweaked his ankle on a 3-point attempt. Ja is a fighter. He's going to continue to try and make this a series. He's going to play as much as he can, and ultimately, even if he's not at 100%, he's still a special player. Shout out to him for giving it his all. He did what he could in this one, but ultimately, it just wasn't enough to overcome that massive first quarter deficit that the Lakers piled on them. For the Lakers, they were mostly led by Anthony Davis, who had a monster game in this one, putting up 31 points, 17 boards, 2 assists, 2 steals, and 3 blocks. As I'm sure you can tell, he dominated on both sides of the court. Defensively, he was a monster. The Grizzlies could not do anything attacking the paint. He was deterring basically anybody from even trying, which was part of why they went up so big, the Lakers, in that first quarter. And offensively, Jaren Jackson was matched up on him a lot in this game, especially in the second half. However, Anthony Davis just kept going at him, and ultimately, perfect offense is going to beat perfect defense every single time, and Jaren was playing some amazing D. It just wasn't enough to stop Anthony Davis, who was in one of his zones. Meanwhile, LeBron James had 25 points, 9 boards, and 5 assists, and another good game from him, one that included an altercation with Dillon Brooks, who continues to try and antagonize LeBron, and this one, he hit him right in the groin. It was kind of like he was going for a steal in the ball, but I really think he was just kind of punching LeBron in the groin area, it seemed like, and the refs kind of agreed because he was ejected with a flagrant 2, which honestly was kind of helpful for the Grizzlies because his defense wasn't very valuable in this game. I mean, LeBron was still having an amazing time. And also offensively, he ended up shooting 3 for 13. He was taking bad shots, which is typical of Dillon Brooks. Some games he's hitting them, and it's a big boost for the Memphis Grizzlies. But there's also a lot of games where it feels like he's just shooting them out of the game, and afterwards, he actually declined to speak to the media, so I'm sure that's something people are going to be talking about on Twitter. Overall, just not a great night for Dillon Brooks, who talked a lot of trash after that Game 2 win. He poked the bear, I guess, like he said, and ultimately LeBron and AD made him pay for that decision. So the Lakers do go up 2-1 in this series, with Game 4 once again being in Los Angeles. It's, of course, a big one for them if they can go up 3-1. I just don't see LeBron and AD blowing a 3-1 lead. Memphis is really starting to feel the absence of those front court guys that have been injured for this series. They miss their physicality with Steven Adams and Brandon Clark down low. The screen setting of Adams as well is huge for this team offensively, especially in the half court. It's just starting to pile up for them. I mean, with Ja Morant dealing with his hand and now maybe an ankle injury and the cramping that he's having, it just seems like the Grizzlies are kind of falling apart at the worst time. Moving on to our third game, we had Bucks Heat Game 3, which has been a very weird series overall, in particular due to injuries, which once again are just a theme of this year's playoffs so far. Of course, Tyler Hero broke his hand in Game 1. He hasn't played since then and probably won't play for the Heat for the rest of their playoff run. Giannis fell on his back in the first quarter of Game 1 and has not played since then, once again being out for Game 3. You've also got Victor Oladipo, who suffered a knee injury towards the end of this game. Hopefully everything's okay there with him. It's heartbreaking for Depot, who really just has been unable to escape the injury bug since 2018 when he made an All-NBA team, an All-Defensive team. He looked like he was a rising All-Star, maybe even superstar one day, someone that Indiana could build their team around. And ultimately, injuries have just completely derailed him since then. He was looking really good in this one. Prayers out to Oladipo. Hate to see that happen to a guy who really should be having so much of a better career if it weren't for these injuries. However, in terms of the series itself, while injuries have caused a massive blow, it's been very interesting because not only did the Heat win Game 1 in Milwaukee after Giannis went down, but they also just won Game 3 in dominant fashion, going up 2-1 on the Milwaukee Bucks, who are most people's pick to win the NBA Finals and, of course, the Eastern Conference as well. This is a huge development in this series, and in this game they were led mostly by Jimmy Butler, no surprise there. He had 30 points and was a sniper from deep, going 4-4 from 3 as the Bucks continued to dare him to shoot those. Duncan Robinson came out of nowhere for a 20-point game. Bam Adebayo had 12 and 11. Kyle Lowry had 15 points off the bench. It was a committee effort for the Heat to get this win, which is typical of this team. And now, being up 2-1 on the Bucks is huge. I mean, obviously the injuries are playing a role. I think if Giannis was healthy, it's probably a 3-0 lead for the Bucks. Maybe 2-1 because this Heat team is playing decently well, but the Heat don't care about that. The Heat are just trying to get the wins that they can go ahead and get, and now they've got a real chance to go up 3-1 on this series because Game 4 is in Miami as well. They were dominant in this game, and sure, the Bucks won dominantly without Giannis in Game 2, but being in Miami, it feels like a completely different atmosphere, and we haven't seen anything yet that really makes me confident that Giannis is going to play Game 4. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if he does, because going down 3-1 in any series is nearly impossible to come back from, especially when you're going up against Jimmy Butler, someone who just continuously elevates his game to one of the best players in the league when he gets to the playoffs. I don't care who's on my roster. I don't want to go up against that Heat team with Jimmy Butler down 3-1, so I wouldn't be surprised if Giannis tries to push it and play. But if he doesn't, there's a real chance that Heat go up 3-1 in this series, shifting all the momentum in their favor and having a real shot on taking down many people's pick to win the NBA Finals, mine included. I thought this was going to be a sweep with the Bucks fully healthy, and maybe it would have been, but that doesn't matter because right now we're in the timeline where the Heat are looking really, really solid, and they could maybe go 3-1 on the Milwaukee Bucks, which is a sentence I really thought there was no chance I would be saying at this point in the series. Shout out to the Heat. I mean, they're playing really well. I know, like I said, injuries are playing a big role, but also missing Tyler Hero is a big blow to them. Additionally, Jimmy's just playing well. Other role players are stepping up. Eric Spoelstra's a great coach. the Heat are doing this thing at the moment, and it's a really interesting series. Hopefully Giannis is able to get back on the court soon so we can see him and Jimmy Butler battle. But for right now, things are looking really interesting in Dade County. And finally, we had Game 4 of Nets versus Sixers taking place in Brooklyn. Philly goes into this one up 3-0. However, they're without Joel Embiid for this one, who suffered a knee sprain in the last game, similar to what Kawhi Leonard is dealing with. And now he's apparently not only out for this game, but might even be out for about a week, which is a, scary sight for the Sixers, who continue to seem to deal with injuries every single year they get to the playoffs. They look great going into things, and then Embiid suffers some kind of injury. Last year, also, James Harden was dealing with an injury coming into these playoffs. James Harden was talking about Achilles soreness. It just feels like the Sixers always have some issue, and it looked like, maybe Brooklyn is able to win this game without Joel Embiid. Going forward, they also aren't going to have Joel, so maybe the Nets extend this series way longer. It's typical Sixers stuff that we see from them. They really just never sweep a team, regardless of how much better that they are. However, in this one, the Sixers finally just got the job done. They finished the sweep, win this series 4-0, the first team to advance to the second round. It was a committee effort, similar to the way it was for the Heat. There were a lot of guys who stepped up in this game. Tobias Harris was great. He had 25 points, 12 rebounds. Been great this entire series. Hopefully they get more of this Toby for the probably eventual Boston series. I mean, I guess the Hawks still have a chance, but when we get Philly versus Boston, hopefully Tobias Harris looks like this. The Sixers are going to need that. Paul Reed also had a great game in the absence of Joel Embiid. He had 10 points and 15 boards, giving him a double-double. James Harden, 17 points and 11 dimes, also getting a double-double. Maxey had 16, Melton had 15. The Sixers just really flashed their depth. Guys stepped up in a big way without Joel Embiid. They got this win. They played no games. They finished this thing out, and ultimately, like I mentioned, get the only sweep so far in the playoffs, although the Nuggets have a chance to sweep the Timberwolves tomorrow as I'm recording this video, and today as you're probably seeing it. So maybe they join them, Jokic and Embiid both getting the sweep out of the way. But Philly is the first team to move on. Credit to them. They just looked way better in this series. They were the much better team than the Nets going into things. But they went ahead and just slammed the door shut on this Brooklyn team like they should have. And they've now got at least a week to rest up, get healthier. Hopefully Joel is ready to go for eventual game 1 of that Boston series. Meanwhile, Brooklyn's season does come to an end in a way that many people probably wouldn't have expected going into the year. Of course, Kevin Durant got traded. Kyrie Irving got moved. Steve Nash fired at the beginning of the season. It was a crazy roller coaster of a year for this Nets squad. However, they deserve a lot of credit for staying together at the end of this thing, making the playoffs, avoiding the play-in tournament, and sure, they got swept, but some of these games were really close. Mikal Bridges was great for the most part throughout this series. Nick Claxton had a great series as well. Cam Johnson in these playoffs secured himself a big bag in the offseason. The Nets, while they're not a phenomenal team, they're not up to the level of a championship contender like the Sixers. This is a good squad going forward. Mikal Bridges established himself as a young star in the making. They've got some interesting young pieces here, and ultimately, I don't know what direction the Nets are going to go, but I'm super interested to see what they do in the offseason, because I think there's a lot of potential in this roster. With that, those are my thoughts on these 4 playoff games. Let me know what your biggest takeaways were from these matchups in the comment section below, and also go ahead and comment down below who is your player of this day. I feel like it would be kind of fun to talk about it with some amazing performances across the league. With all that being said, I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. Appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, stay back.